Alright, it's about that time for a rundown on this decades-long Jurassic saga. I'll be doing an overall review including each entry, but with focus on 3D throughout, where applicable. And of course, where it all started, the original Jurassic Park. It was originally released in 1993, but 20 years later, re-released theatrically in 3D and on 3D Blu-ray shortly thereafter. Now when it comes to 3D conversions, this is one of the best. Very strong depth. Things coming out of the screen where possible. I mean, that's entirely based on the composition of each individual shot, and powerful space between objects into the distance. They really went all out with this 3D conversion to make it the best possible. This wasn't a quick cash grab, it was done well. And the movie itself? Well, of course, it was excellent. I mean, no film is perfect. There are a few things that didn't age so well. Some might find the feminist jokes a little cringy. I also found some of the foreshadowing or attempted foreshadowing to be clumsily done, like an awkward conversation between Hammond and Dennis Nedry about his financial troubles. That just felt kind of shoved in there, as well as a random line about the boy teasing his sister about being a computer nerd, and she says, "I'm a hacker." And then that's supposed to feel organic later when she saves the day using a computer. But for me, that just felt like it was awkward foreshadowing. And really, most talk about computers in movies from the 70s to 90s just seems awkward today. There was more of a mysticism to it at the time. A lot of common tropes attributing more capabilities to computers than they really have. The trope of a single simple password being used, and in this case, referring to basic computer skills as, being a hacker. But I guess that was kind of true at the time. That being said, the movie is excellently written, very well-rounded, excellently paced. There's never a dull moment or a moment that feels unessential. Every scene is intriguing or necessary or building the tension. And it's not just jump scares, but there are a few good jump scares, but it's well-rounded terror, which coupled with a spirit of adventure, as well as thoughtful science fiction that's based in areas of fact. Just enough to make it somewhat believable, which heightens your investment. So how did the 3D turn out for this one? They did replace the original Universal logo at the beginning, which I'm not a fan of movies doing. I really wish they would just keep the original logo of the period. But right from the beginning, you can tell that this is a beyond top-notch conversion. Even shots that you would think would be very difficult to do, like leaves and different complicated layers, are done seamlessly. Distant shots aren't... the choice was made to not make them have powerful depth, likely in an effort to be more realistic. Like when you see things from a distance, the depth disappears because the distance between your eyes relative to what you're looking at is almost non-existent the farther you get away from something. So that was in an effort to be realistic, but all close-up shots were powerful depth. They also did nice jobs with unusual lighting, rays of light. Surprisingly well with reflections and transparencies. Even the rays from powerful flashlights looked good. I mean, you could kind of tell it was a conversion because maybe that's asking too much, but still, for being a conversion, the rays look pretty good. And I'm really nitpicking here. It's not even worth mentioning, but like if you pause when the brief frame when the flashlight is aiming at the camera, you can actually see the residual lines from the depth maps that they used to convert the rays of light. So you can see the pattern that they drew in different layers to give that light ray different levels of depth and spaces. There were also shots that just were made for 3D, like the shot of them climbing over the fence. That was perfect in 3D. The angles of it, the camera moving underneath. a shot of the velociraptor jumping directly at the camera. And at the end, it's a nice touch to see the Amblin logo converted to 3D. E.T., by the way, is getting re-released. Unlike Jaws, it's not getting a 3D re-release, unfortunately, so far. So far, they say it's just getting IMAX. But so maybe this is the only time we'll see E.T. in 3D. And also on the Blu-ray is one of the relatively few 3D movies that has a 3D extra bonus material. It talks about the 3D conversion, and right from the beginning it has a nice touch. If you see the Real D, the polarized glasses laying there on the table by the computer monitor, when you're looking at it on a 3D display, you'll notice that one of the lenses looks black through one eye and the other one looks black in the other eye. So it looks flickery when you're looking at both at the same time. But that's exactly what it would look like in real life when you're looking at a pair of polarized glasses through another pair of polarized glasses. Obviously, the 3D camera filming that wouldn't capture that. So they had to have done that after the fact as sort of an in joke or just a nice touch, which I appreciated. And it shows them doing real-time editing and checking of the conversion as they go on a passive monitor. And here you can see the depth maps, just how good they are, the level of detail that went into these depth maps, as well as the adding of particles to enhance certain shots. And then in 1997 came the sequel, not called Jurassic Park 2, interestingly, it's called The Lost World, Jurassic Park. On a side note, I bought the Jurassic Park 4K collection, which included the first 3 movies and Jurassic World, but I resold those first and last movies and kept the middle 2 because those aren't available in 3D, so I kept those in 4K and printed a custom cover for it. Nowadays, before the lead up to the latest Jurassic movie, they did release every individual film in 4K instead of just as part of a collection. But anyway, the second movie, this takes place not on the main island of Jurassic Park where the theme park was, but it takes place to a secondary island off to the side where they have labs and not open to the public, and was supposedly where they did more creation and then transported dinosaurs over. John Hammond makes a cameo at the beginning as well as his grandchildren, but otherwise the one returning main character would be Jeff Goldblum's character. Now this movie was a success, definitely commercially, critically to a degree. I mean, it's no big surprise to say it wasn't as good as Jurassic Park, but I mean, the first one set the bar so high, and you can't just retell the same story. For what it was, I thought it was a very interesting movie. It had some fun scenes. It went out in some new directions. I especially liked the parts going to the old labs on this other island. And then, for the first time, dinosaurs reach civilization later on in the movie. That was an interesting twist. A pretty exciting conclusion, fit for a blockbuster. And then in 2001 came Jurassic Park 3. This was widely viewed as inferior to the other two. Here's how I see it. The first 2 movies, they both have a moment, pretty much, where I would call it a stuff hits the fan moment. And for those first 2 movies, that happens about halfway through the film, and they're both over 2 hours. In fact, the second movie is slightly longer, but in my opinion, it has a lot more fluff. It could have been way shorter, and it dragged in areas. But still, they both have that where everything goes wrong, and chaos ensues about halfway through. But Jurassic Park 3, it's a lot tighter. It's an hour and a half about, and that dinosaur action starts about 20 minutes into the movie. That's right, 20 minutes. Are there what could be viewed as silly moments? Yes. A couple that come to mind are the mother is the woman on the island getting entangled with a skeleton and just over the top, like comical screaming. Another would be, probably the biggest one would be on the way there, Alan Grant, who is the returning cast member in this film. Ellie just makes a cameo at the beginning. The crazy scene would be where Alan Grant has a little nightmare on the plane, where Velociraptor is talking to him. A little silly, yes, but besides that, I think it's a very tight movie. I like the running time better. It makes it work better, and I actually enjoy it more than Jurassic Park 2, personally. It takes place on that same secondary island as Jurassic Park 2, but they see new places. There's an investing story about parents looking to save their child on the island and their relationship, and these band of weirdos that they hire to help them. Speaking of their son that they're looking for, there's a subplot about him. He's like a feral child, so to speak, kind of like Jumanji, where he's been surviving on his own, and that was well written. Some really humorous conversation between him and Alan Grant. Retrospectively, there's what could be viewed as foreshadowing of the Jurassic World movies. You've got an expanded plot about the raptors' intelligence, which was already a story element before that, but also about their communication. That was a major plot point in Jurassic Park 3, about how they have the ability to make noises and communicate with each other. And that's key going into Jurassic World with Blue and the other velociraptors, as well as the scene at the end with the pteranodons escaping the island. And the line was said, "It's a whole new world for them." And that, if that doesn't foreshadow Jurassic World with the dinosaurs getting out into the world, I don't know what does. So the original trilogy, especially the first one, groundbreaking use of technology. And back then, it wasn't all edited in a computer like it is nowadays. Like nowadays, when like the things that were done on the computer, like the animation, they would actually print that out to film and then edit that in optically. But these optical printers that would print data, that would print images from the computer onto film, weren't of the highest resolution. So when you see these HD transfers, especially on the 4K versions, you'll notice the computer animation often looks softer compared to the live action, because that was from that relatively low-res film printouts worked in the old-fashioned way to create a film master, and then that film negative master was scanned at 4K to create these Blu-rays. And then that leads us to the next trilogy, Jurassic World. Here's the 3D Blu-ray of that with a lenticular cover. Is that a man on a motorcycle riding with dinosaurs? Yep, but it starts out pretty mundane. In fact, at a place that the original Jurassic Park never made it. Yes, the dream was finally fulfilled of turning it into a functioning theme park, although Hammond didn't live to see it. It was owned by another investor, Masrani, and instead of calling it Jurassic Park, they called it Jurassic World. They built it on the same island, but on a different part. And in the story of this movie, it's already been open for years, and it's hugely successful, and it's an established place. It jumps right into that story. Henry Wu, the scientist who appeared briefly in the original film, is also in this new trilogy, and he also is playing God like Hammond, and things do go wrong. Besides the so-called normal dinosaurs, none of them are normal per se, but they went even further and created a new breed called Indominus Rex. Part T-Rex, part Velociraptor, part classified. So the story focuses on Owen, who's been raising velociraptors and has a close relationship with them, is able to interact with them, and Claire, whose nephews come to visit, and they all have to survive there after things go wrong. So after this brief window of seeing an actual functioning Jurassic Park, aka Jurassic World, that dream is gone for good, multiple lives are lost, and the place is trashed. This was a kind of an interesting direction to take the movie, because it worked for both newcomers, who may not have known the lore, as well as old fans. It was kind of like felt like a reboot at first, although it was a continuation. You didn't need to catch up before you watched it. It also introduced some really interesting new technology, like the transport systems and the tourist attractions at the park, and they even have a mosasaurus, just similar to the Shamu attractions, except way bigger. Now, also to note, there is a Netflix animated Jurassic series. It's called Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous. But it is canon, and it fits right in with the timeline. In fact, the first season of the show takes place around Jurassic World. It's about a group of kids that go to a camp there and are there when things go wrong and get stuck there on the island, even after everybody evacuates. The whole first season is leading up to that, and at the end of it, they're stuck there. Seasons 2 and 3 of that series show what happened to them when they're on the island, and there's some really good character development. If you might be turned off by the animation style and think, oh, this is for kids, maybe set aside some time to watch it. I found it very enjoyable, the way the characters progress, their relationships with each other, their backstories. It was a fun show. And then came the next movie, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Now, the first scene in this movie actually takes place sometime before the body of the movie, the main bulk of the movie. And that first scene of these hired thugs going to the island to get the DNA of the Indominus Rex, that actually overlaps with Camp Cretaceous. And the actual scene of one of the men being chased at night and by the T-Rex and then being eaten by the Mosasaurus and the helicopter flying, that's in the cartoon, recreated. So if you watch the first scene of this movie, watch the next Netflix series as well, because those scenes blend together and you see it from their vantage point, which is pretty interesting. So anyway, back to Fallen Kingdom. In that movie, the main island of Isla Nublar does get pretty much destroyed by a volcanic eruption, but a lot of the dinosaurs get taken off, and it's revealed, and even more crazy mad scientist experiments are revealed to have been going on. Jurassic World revealed the Indominus Rex, which was a hybrid of creatures not entirely known, but it also was different in that it had long arms that were more usable than a T-Rex, and also especially a chilling intelligence. Another similar hybrid was revealed in the animated series Camp Cretaceous, called the Scorpius Rex. Then in this movie, Fallen Kingdom, there's another one called the Indoraptor. But they're all very similar in that they have this eerie personality to them. Sort of a, for lack of a better term, like lack of soul. They're shown having this unanimal-like intelligence, as well as hunting for sport rather than food, which is uncharacteristic. So these creatures are specifically characterized as basically abominations. And historically in lore, abominations are viewed as typically not having a right to life. Like when you think of the book of Genesis, and mentions angels having offspring with women, and these hybrids that were giants, and then God killed them in the flood. And then you think of other works in more recent times, like Frankenstein, like the end of Bride of Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster knowingly kills himself and his prospective bride, saying, "We belong dead." So it's the same with these creepy hybrids. They're viewed as just, these dinosaurs are not typical. And speaking of hybrids, one of the plot points in this film was that Hammond's associate, who had this dream of cloning dinosaurs, actually did human cloning to bring back his dead daughter. And before Jurassic World released, one of the major rumors going around was that this new Indominus Rex was going to be a dinosaur-human hybrid. And they never revealed what the other DNA in this dinosaur was. They just said that's classified. So it makes you wonder if that was the original plan, or if it is and they just didn't reveal it yet. That in fact the Indominus and these other hybrids are really have some human DNA in them, which accounts for this creepy intelligence. So, how was the 3D for Jurassic World? Well, the first Jurassic World movie had great 3D, just as you would expect. It was made in 2015, a solid conversion, and even in the opening, one of the opening scenes, it had a nice touch for 3D levers. One of the boys is looking through a ViewMaster, and he sees a 3D image of of dinosaurs on a reel. This was overall a nice, solid 3D Blu-ray. Now, Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, made 3 years later in 2018, and frankly, I'm surprised, actually shocked, at the low quality 3D of this film. For such a high budget, multi-million dollar franchise, Universal Pictures, wide 3D release, it's utterly surprising how low of a budget they put into this 3D conversion. You would never guess it was made in 2018. It looks like something from the early days of 3D conversion. For one thing, the depth is extremely shallow. A lot of the time it's just flat with very subtle layers, as least as possible. And that's besides the errors. Like right from the beginning in an early scene, the woman walking to the door, you see some fluttering around the side of her head. And then when you see her from the other side, you clearly see the outline of her side that was rotoscoped was off, and part of the stairs behind her are cut away and stuck to the side of her body. Transparency is also not handled well, like a simple shot looking out of a vehicle window. Her face is partly stuck to the window and slanted out in an underwater scene with glass. The water that was squirting through a hole was just crudely cut out where that water is spraying through. They didn't bother to use separate particles to cover up any errors that he made, which they could have done at least. So you see part of Owen's face as that water that's spraying out. It's a distortion. You can see it even when it's playing in real time. Same thing with smoke. Not well rotoscoped, and they didn't even bother to cover it up with CGI smoke. The mistakes they did make. It just looks bubbly, and it sticks to the background. So, yeah, this was utterly shocking, and it's really the only movie I can think from that's so recent. And it's funny, the decades-old Jurassic Park is way more powerful 3D than this movie. So how was the movie itself? Well, I'd call this the Last Jedi of Jurassic Park films. And ironically, they were made the same year. Maybe there's something culturally going on. I don't know. People wanting to think outside the box, so they just threw the box away and went somewhere else. That's what it was, basically. Took a U-turn, went opposite direction, not just story-wise to branch out into new areas, but also directing and acting-wise. Now, I liked Last Jedi, okay? And I especially liked it compared to Force Awakens, because Force Awakens was a sort of spat in the face of the prequels. And in a sense, even the originals, by not honoring their tradition of progress, instead just trying to imitate them blatantly. So what I do like about Fallen Kingdom is the overarching story of the direction it's going. It's not your typical get stuck on an island and survive for the rest of the film. This one's really telling a story that you don't know what's going to happen, and in that sense there's more intrigue that way. So this is a very different animal than the 4 films that came before it. But it's also like a Last Jedi, and it has a little bit more awkward attempts at humor, a little more irreverence in the humor, which I don't think ages too well, and it kind of takes you out. It's maybe a little over the top. Shoehorned political reference of the time from those who remember of the presidential campaigns. They have the bad guy in the movie, of course, say, "What a nasty woman." I won't explain the reference, but some may know. That immediately reminded me of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, that very awkward line of Dr. Robotnik saying, "There are good people on both sides." Seriously. Seriously. Yeah, not subtle at all. Fallen Kingdom also had a couple of fan servicey moments, like the T-Rex, which has been named Rexy, saving the heroes for no explicable reason, really, other than being iconic at this point. And also some story elements that really stretch the bounds of believability, like using a dinosaur that rams with its head to break out of a brick cell that they were in. Just all the variables that went into it were a little bit of a stretch. There was another moment from the ending that reminded me of a moment from the ending of The Last Jedi. A quote from the ending that was meant to seem inspirational or give meaning to something, but just came off as morally questionable. Like at the end of The Last Jedi, Finn is going to sacrifice himself by flying into the big gun, and usually sacrificing yourself to save the lives of many others would seem like a noble thing. It has been, especially in the Star Wars universe. That's no question there. But then Rose, the character of Rose, stops Finn from doing it by crashing their vehicles together, which could have killed them anyway, and preventing him from saving everybody's lives. And then utters the quote, "That's how we're gonna win, not fighting what we hate, saving what we love." Okay, sounds good on the surface, but it's morally questionable. And the same thing happens in Jurassic World. At the end, the little girl lets the dinosaurs out, lets them all out of the building to save their lives. And then she says, "I had to. They're alive, like me." Like, yeah, and so that means she was responsible for all the deaths in the next movie, basically. But it's supposed to sound noble in the moment. I mean, in my opinion, maybe it'd be better if they just showed what happened, that they got out, but not try to make some moral out of it, because there totally isn't. I mean, people's lives, dinosaur lives, choice is clear to some, I guess. But anyway, going on from that ending, you see the real meaning of the name of this sequel trilogy, Jurassic World. Not just the name of this revamped theme park from the first movie, but the literal world, yes. The whole point of this trilogy is that the dinosaurs are getting out into the whole world. They show pteranodons flying, which harkens back to the end of Jurassic Park 3, and Jeff Goldblum comes back, and he utters the line, "Welcome to Jurassic World," which has now taken on a whole new meaning. And the following year, 2019, there was a short film that was made to cinematic standards. It was called Battle at Big Rock. It aired on TV, and it's also on the official YouTube channel. Battle at Big Rock. It's about one of these instances of dinosaurs terrorizing humans now in a trailer park. People out camping. And the frightening experience of a small, new, blended family. Now, the original trilogy came out 4 years apart for each film, and the Jurassic World trilogy came out 3 years apart for each film, well, it's supposed to at least. The last film in the trilogy was supposed to come out in 2021, but due to the shutdowns worldwide, it was delayed, like many other films. However, in 2021, they did do a IMAX short -- preview called Jurassic Dominion Prologue, which they've said will likely not be in the latest movie. But it has, interestingly, a flashback to millions of years ago of dinosaurs back in the day. And also flash forward to dinosaurs now loose in the world, terrorizing people, like at a drive-in movie theater. And then you've got the last film itself, Jurassic World Dominion, June 2022. I'm seeing it tomorrow evening. We'll see how it goes.
3 hours later.
What do you think?
Good.
You? What are your thoughts?
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, me too. And you got a shirt for it. Perfect. Only one here that thought of it. So I'm back home now. Allow me to expand upon that. How was it? Jurassic World Dominion. Well, first of all, the 3D. Again, it was underwhelming. It was, I would say it's better than Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, but that's not saying much because that had surprisingly bad 3D for a recent movie. Dominion had certain shots here and there that had stronger 3D, but that stronger 3D was only relative. It was when it hit those stronger 3D shots that was really moderate, medium 3D by today's standards. No real pop-outs, even where there were scenes that lent themselves to pop-outs, such as hands sticking forward and dinosaurs jumping at the camera. It was very underdone. And most of the time, the depth was extremely minimal. I mean, it was there. It's a real conversion, but it was very flat, very little space between layers. So nothing like conversions you would expect nowadays, and that they're capable of nowadays, unfortunately. That being said, I still think a little 3D is better than none, and it did enhance it, although it was a little disappointing to know that it could have been better, like especially in the scenes of the Velociraptor chase through the city. Those were some thrilling scenes, and parachuting scenes. There's a great scene with the airplane. That was really edge of your seat stuff. And there was one wow moment of 3D that I can think of that did work effectively well. That was with water. It was where you saw the level surface of the water going up to the camera and away from it, and it truly had that perception of a strong slant. And then as it goes partway through the water, that was one somewhat brief shot, but it was very well done. As for the movie itself, it's by far the longest Jurassic movie. 2.5 hours, I believe over 2.5 hours. And in my opinion, bloated. It could have been shorter, I believe, because I don't think it has a whole lot of story to tell, especially with what they were working with. I mean, I'm okay with long movies as long as they have a reason for being that long. That's fine, nothing wrong with that, but there's no inherent virtue in being that long. There was also a retcon of Maisie Lockwood's character, the little girl who was supposedly a clone. That was retconned, and I'm not sure it really even added anything to the story. They made it like it was some big revelation, but I don't really see how it benefited the story. In fact, it kind of took away from it, for me at least. Took away from the last movie. That being said, it was fun enough. I wouldn't say it's a movie that really has anything to say. So they had some generic, seemingly environmentalist message, maybe. At the end, it's really hard to tell what they're trying to say. Maybe they're not really trying to say anything, but at the very least trying to say something. But for me, I think it's the weakest Jurassic movie. There are some highlights, though. Of course, there's the returning cast. Just from seeing the trailer alone, I went in without spoilers, but I fully expected Ellie to be divorced from the family she had in Jurassic Park 3 in order to allow her to get back with Alan Grant, and that's exactly what happened. So they were fun enough to see back in action. I would say Goldblum was more of a highlight. His sense of humor is fresh as ever, and he's just fun to watch. The unique way he talks, that's always fun, and even a subtle joke about his semi-shirtless scene in the original film, that was funny. and some funny interactions with the new cast, the Jurassic World cast. And speaking of which, Chris Pratt, always a fun actor, of course. And to see him interact with Blue again and Blue's offspring, which was part of the plot. And they had a really nice wrapping up of their plot line together, touching scene. So I thought that was handled well and concluded nicely. So other than that, yeah, a beautiful photography, outdoor photography, and of course, nowadays you're going to get solid computer graphics. Just not amazing 3D, but it is good enough to see in 3D. I would still choose that over 2D, especially with IMAX. There's no reason to not see it in 3D, because with IMAX with laser, besides the subtle 3D, you'll still get those the full resolution and the dynamic colors. So yeah, if you're going to see it, IMAX 3D is the way to go. The original Jurassic World movie had a unique aspect ratio of, I believe it was 2:1. So it's kind of like between the usual 16:9-ish ratio and the extra wide scope ratio. I'm not sure if they did this on purpose, but they sort of did all three. The first one was in the middle. The second movie, Fallen Kingdom, was full scope. And this one was full standard widescreen shape, roughly 16:9. It didn't change aspect ratios throughout the movie like some IMAX do. So yeah, with this Jurassic World trilogy, every aspect ratio is different. And is that the end of the Jurassic story? Well, Camp Cretaceous Season 5 is coming. And if you haven't been watching it, maybe you're wondering, wait, I thought those kids were stuck on Isla Nublar, the one that got destroyed by the volcano. Well, at the end of Season 3, beginning of Season 4, they got off the island, if just in time. And the first episode of Season 4 had them escaping on a boat, and that was actually one of the most exciting episodes. It had some good, intense, scary scenes, and if you ask me, that kind of could have been a nice conclusion to the series, but Season 4 just went kind of wild, kind of like Fallen Kingdom did about the same time. It went off in a different wacky sci-fi direction. They went to conveniently another unheard of as yet island with some really futuristic technology that kind of takes you out of the realm of believability, even by their standards. And the season ended with a cliffhanger regarding some of their family. Supposedly they're going to see them in this next season. And I believe Season 5 is supposed to be the last season. So we'll see how they wrap that up, and maybe if they tie it in with Dominion, like they did with the last movie, or overlap in any way. And will that be the last canon chapter entry for now? Maybe. I honestly don't see how they could stretch this or milk this any further into the future, or if they should. But we'll see for now. All right, see you next time.